So this is the October 18th meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. It is 7:02. We have a quorum, so we will open up the meeting. First item of business is to review the agenda for additions, removals, adjustments. One thing I have is we will start with item 2, but we will move it to the end when Adam shows up from regional planning, who should be here momentarily. So we could probably start that. But I'd like to move that to the end after 4, pending his arrival. I don't know, does anybody else have anything they'd like to comment on or question on the agenda? Okay, we'll go ahead. So the first administrative matter is to approve the minutes of September.
I can't participate in that since I was not in attendance.
Okay.
You won't have a quorum to vote.
Well, we have a quorum, but we will have somebody abstain. Is that?
Because you won't have 4 votes.
Hey, Chris, do we need to vote to approve minutes apart
No,
from
yeah.
changes?
Technically, no.
Okay.
So yeah, so it's really more of you review them, you make any changes or amendments to them, and then the chair makes those notes, and because you can't not approve minutes.
Yeah, but you're confusing me a little bit that we don't have a.
It doesn't matter. Rob got me right.
So, anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion that no changes to the minutes. Approve them.
Good to
me.
See if there's
Yeah.
any discussion. Nope. Any discussion? Okay, everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye, sorry.
Favor or opposed?
Pictures in favor.
Okay,
In favor, sorry.
That's all good.
okay, thank you. So that's taken care of. Minutes are approved as is. Next item is zoning administrators report.
I don't have anything special, nothing crazy going on. The only thing that, from a zoning standpoint, more from a development standpoint, as you all have probably seen, construction has begun on the firehouse apartments over on Firehouse Drive.
Okay, any questions for Chris? Okay, take care of that one. Next one is ARPA Funding Advisory Committee. Rob, you have an update for us?
So we are in the process of going through the mountain of data that was collected from the community in different formats over the course of the summer, pretty much. And that's all been compiled into what's currently a couple different spreadsheets, but we're working through that. And between yesterday's meeting and our next meeting, we're moving forward with trying to formulate suggestions and how to move forward and present to the select board is kind of the rough overview of what we're doing. There is talk, one of the big things that keeps coming up is affordable housing, and just in that vague of a sense as a suggestion from the community. And so what we do with that has been a topic we've kind of thrown around as well. And that's one of the things that we've been talking about as well. And then, of course, with the zoning updates that we're working on, there's some crossover and correlation there as well that we were talking about last night. So.
Yeah, and we were going to touch on that in a little bit too. Adam wanted to just a little more detail on what we had for data. So I've got some of that for you guys tonight as well.
Okay, well, thank you. So the next activity is miscellaneous correspondence. I have had a distraction this past month-ish, so I haven't really sent out timely stuff to anybody. So there's certain things on this list that are come and gone. There is attached a brochure from the Addison Northwest Mount Abe merger study committee. I figured that would be pertinent as it relates to our town plan section regarding education and childcare for your use. There was some activity with regards to interest on status, I guess you could call it, with the bylaw modernization grant. I received a call from a reporter from 7 Days. I responded with, yeah, I can talk to you, and never heard back from them. They were preparing an article about bylaw changes and housing and all that kind of stuff, which there must have been others doing as well, because Jake Hemmering from Vermont Housing and Community put out an email shortly after that, days after that, asking for statuses. So I responded to that. My response, his inquiry and that response are in the packet. I also received a letter from the Grafton Planning Commission, sort of along the same lines. They're doing a character survey and want to know how we are doing ours with respect to our bylaw grant. One, sit down wherever you like. So I responded to that, and the response and his inquiry are in the packet. There was an announcement for the municipal planning grants, which we haven't really talked about. It's not really on our radar, I don't believe, but the Conservation Commission is interested in applying for it, and have expressed interest in applying for it, and regards to looking at wildlife corridors. Whether they're continuing with that, I haven't heard anything since that initial inquiry. There was an email from Katie Raycroft Meyer about an NPR piece on housing. It's like a 5-minute video, or the text is there as well. It's well worth taking a look at. I recommend you do that. The link's in there. Let me see what else is there. There's a couple activities that have come and gone. Oh, we had the town had received an inquiry about interns for this fall session, but by the time it got circulated, it was kind of past the time that you would be considering interns at the beginning of their school year. So I did not do anything with that. And that is miscellaneous correspondence. If anybody's got any questions or comments with any of that.
I was just, when I was reading over the material, I think we don't need another grant because we have a grant ongoing.
We've got plenty to
But,
do, yeah.
you know, when I read, I haven't seen any material lately from the Pedestrian and Bicycle Advisory Committee. And I wondered if they might want to apply for a grant for a more thorough study of traffic patterns and ways to deal with making the town more bicycle and pedestrian friendly, which is one of our objectives. And then they're taking it up now. And I noticed that they're just sort of jumping around saying, well, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that on this street, that street. And if they could get some money for a grant, it seems to me that would allow a holistic view of the traffic issues, the traffic, bicycling, pedestrian issues, which get a lot of talk these days.
I'll circle back and see if they got that announcement. I think it came to Valerie initially.
Yeah. I think also I saw someplace also that VTrans has grants for traffic studies.
Yes.
I don't know if they're aware of that.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to do their job for them, but it would seem that that might be really helpful.
Yeah, and I've seen those too, and I've passed them through because it didn't seem to pertain to us. But well, I didn't get any minutes from them for their last meeting. The meeting before that, they didn't have a quorum.
Right, I
So I
remember.
think they're struggling with some organizational issues too.
Yeah.
That's just my observation.
Right. Looks that way from the outside.
Anything else?
I just had a question about this correspondence from the Planning Commission Chair in Grafton. And he mentions this survey of existing town conditions. Is he right about that? And by existing town conditions, is this some of what Adam's going to talk about? Or is this a survey of people's opinions on things?
I'll give you my 2 cents, and then Adam can embellish on it. There, as part of the interest in looking at zoning, there is in the publications one, I can't remember the title of the one right off the top of the page, which has our co-housing right on the front page, but there is a discussion, and there are forums to do a physical survey so that you can ascertain what historical or current setbacks are, types of structures and that sort of thing. So I'm not clear on what he was, if he was looking for that or if he was looking for some soft values in the survey. But I did respond with the fact that we have, it's quite old, it's almost 20 years old, 15, 20 years old. We have a character survey that was done of the physical, a couple blocks within the town that were physically measured as far as density and setbacks and that sort of thing. So I shared with him in a nutshell, which is in that communication with what I felt, what I perceive we've done. And I'm not sure, I haven't heard back from him, so I'm not sure where he's going with that information.
Well, thank
Does
you.
that help?
Yes.
You have anything to add?
I haven't seen the correspondence from the gentleman
Yeah.
from Grafton, so I don't know what he was asking about, so I can't
That's
really
fine.
comment.
Anything else? So that'll take care of our miscellaneous correspondence, and Adam just barely came in, very patient through the finishing of that, and we'll pick up with Adam's presentation and his work.
Great, thank you, Kevin. So just to reintroduce myself to you all, it's been a little bit since I've been here. My name is Adam Luigi. I'm director of the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. And you have hired us to help you with a grant that you have. It's basically called the Bylaws Modernization Grant. And it's the purpose of the Bylaw Modernization Grant is to improve opportunities for housing within basically your village planning area specifically. So if you think of the Bristol Town Plan, you've got 3 planning areas. A large one or a significant portion of it is right around the village of Bristol, and that's the area that this grant is focusing on.
Do you want to map that up?
I don't think so. I think everybody here knows generally where your village is.
Okay.
Thank you, though. Let's see, last September or early in September, I gave you one of what we have 3 presentations. It was on roles and responsibilities of basically planning commissions, development review boards, zoning administrators, select boards. Tonight, really quickly, I'm going to move you to the 3rd of those presentations that we do. The second one is on basically municipal planning. You've already done that. We're working on currently implementation of your plan, and that's what this presentation is on. It's just a I think I'm going to go through it relatively quickly because you are doing it. You are implementing the town plan by working on these bylaws with me. So you don't need a lot. There are a lot of other things you can do, and we'll talk a little bit about them. But you're already well on your way to implementation. So we'll go through that quickly. And then we'll move basically through your agenda, talk a little bit about Bristol's demographics and the changing nature of Bristol's demographics, and specifically how that impacts the housing market and what you need. And then we'll talk a little bit about, Chris will talk a little bit about your ARPA, the survey that you all did recently, and what that said about housing. And then we'll talk about, basically, we'll just run through a list of things that we will look at in the course of this work. So it's really cut, and I'll ask you if there are things that we missed. There are things that you want to do. We'll ask Chris. I got a couple of suggestions from the Addison County Community Trust that worked on the firehouse development, which is having its grand opening. Is it tomorrow at 1 or Thursday at 1?
I'm not sure.
It's very soon.
It's either tomorrow or next Wednesday. It's a Wednesday.
Tomorrow or next Wednesday. Maybe I'm a week ahead of time. But anyway, on that particular project. So that's kind of my map of where we're going, and then we'll go to next month is when we'll really get into the design work. So this is kind of the last of setting the table of how do you implement your plan? Why housing? Why do we need it now in Bristol? Kind of the demographics behind it, and then what are some of the things that we can do in your zoning regulations and or subdivision regulations to help create opportunities to build housing. Okay, so with that, unless you all have any questions, I'm gonna go to the presentation. All right, and please speak up if you have questions while I'm doing this, because I've got small pictures of you in front of me, but it'd really help if you just spoke up, and that way I can make sure I hear you and respond to your questions. Okay, so again, this training is one of 3, and it's on implementing the town plan. So this will be a little bit of a review for you. It's kind of the process. It's a community assessment. It's a survey. You develop your community vision. Your plan identifies your goals and objectives. You map out the future, identify priorities to be within your plan, and then once your plan is completed, we go to implementation. That's where we are now. Eventually, you go back and review your plan. We want to focus on implementation. In 2015, the legislature changed the planning cycle from a 5-year planning cycle to an 8-year planning cycle. And largely, the reason that they did that was so that towns, planning commissions, could spend more time here in implementation. They didn't feel like they had to go right from the plan to the zoning and then right back to the plan. The implementation can be a lot broader than just regulatory steps. So like I said, you have regulatory implementation. It's what we are currently working on. And specifically focused on housing, but it is your subdivision it's your unified development regulations in Bristol. So zoning, subdivision, floodplain generally are the things that make that up. And then there's the non-regulatory implementation, which I don't think a lot of planning commissions take advantage of, because it's kind of the fun stuff. It's the other grants that you were talking about a little earlier in this meeting. So yes, there are other groups in Bristol that can do it, but you also have the ability, and it depends a little bit on your select board, to basically do non-regulatory implementation of your plan. You've set your goals, you've set the goals, policies, priority actions for the town of Bristol in your plan. The 8-year cycle hopefully gives you the opportunity to work on regulatory implementation and non-regulatory implementation. And the non-regulatory can be other planning studies and the implementation of those through grants or other funding that you can raise in the town. So I'd say, go ahead, Chris. So this is actually from the Bristol Town Plan. So if you look up at your population housing, conduct a housing study to identify housing needs in the Bristol community, and update zoning regulations to allow a variety of housing types to accommodate all segments of the community. So good for you. Here we are. But you've basically laid out an implementation chart. of the things that either you or the select board are going to do. So your other one there is basically economic development and looking at commercial and light industry that are compatible with the character of the town. And then an inventory of the significant historic structures. So basically, in your plan, you went through it, you went through the steps, you created implementation, and here we are working on them. So I want to give you all kudos for that.
Adam, are you scrolling through those slides?
Chris is.
Are you not seeing them on your end?
I'm not.
Oh, I apologize.
It's still the cover slide.
Oh, good God, hang on, give me 2 seconds. Let's see if I can get that here. So this was the last slide he was talking about. Can you all see that now? And then we're on to this one now. My bad.
Yep. We're up to date now.
Okay, great. So again, regulatory implementation, what does that mean? Zoning and subdivision, flood hazard, and then local ordinances. So for example, your road policies, your driveway policies can have a big effect on what you can build. And actually in this process, one of the things we probably should look at are your town road policies. So a lot of towns still have road ordinances that go back to V-Trans's schematics from probably the 70s or so. And I think there are slides A76 and B71 or something about the width of roads and driveways and turning radiuses. And the roads in particular basically show that you're going to have 11-foot lanes and 4-foot shoulders and curbs and pretty big expensive roads to build that don't necessarily apply to or are necessary in the village of Bristol or even on the outskirts of Bristol. So the ordinances are an important piece, and we will take a look at those in addition to your zoning subdivision regulations.
I would note that there's noise ordinances listed there, and I, for one, would like to have that be an explicit part of our conversation. And that might include truck and traffic noise, but also just ambient noise from neighbors. We don't have a noise ordinance. We have a lot of noise complaints, which is common in most communities, and no means of currently really doing anything to address those or mediate those between neighbors. And without ordinances, we won't. And so I think if we're looking at denser development over time, which I hope we are, if we're looking at keeping our downtown both for residences, living and businesses, we'll need to have noise ordinances that are effective ways of mediating the impacts of future growth. So I'd like to flag that one for specific discussion by the group in the future.
Okay, great. It's a good point, John. I will tell you, noise ordinances are really hard. But it doesn't mean we can't find some good ones and take them up. But that one may take a bit of discussion.
I believe this was discussed at a select board meeting in the past year or so. Does anyone remember that? I saw in the minutes, and there was very little enthusiasm for taking it on.
And unfortunately, noise ordinances it is an ordinance, thus it is a select board matter. You can author it, you can present it, and then the select board is the one who takes action on the ordinances.
Yeah, or it could be put forward as a referendum to the public and let the public vote on it. Yes,
I believe so.
we can pass zoning that way.
It's not a zoning issue. I want to
It's
be
an
crystal,
ordinance.
it's an ordinance. There's a
Right.
very big difference in those two.
Right. But anyhow, yeah, that's something I'd love for us to talk about, to have some teeth in our bylaws that allow mediation of this thing. They don't have to be, punitive, but to have some pathway for neighbors' noise issues to be resolved would be helpful, I think. And one of our goals is to have more dense development over time. That only happens when people can live close to each other, not impress their noise upon each other. Otherwise, people want to move to the country for peace and quiet.
So John, I have flagged it and we will spend some time on it in this process. And
Thanks.
if you all can get to something you want to present to your select board. So we just talked about regulatory implementation, non-regulatory implementation, improving public facilities, which could be capital budget planning. And generally that ultimately that falls to your select board, but you can encourage them to focus. You can conduct planning studies about improvements needed to, say, sidewalks. I think I heard you guys talking about earlier tonight. Encourage them to put that in their process. You can hold public forums. You can help conservation commissions. You could create a housing commission if you felt that was something that would help move a housing issue forward in Bristol. So you don't have the power of the purse, but under statute, you have the power to plan for basically any item that's contained within the plan. And your plan contains a number of broad sectors, including housing, including economic development, including transportation, et cetera, including natural resources. So that gets to supplemental plans, more specific plans than the full plan. It could be bike and pedestrian plans, which again, I heard you talking about earlier. It could be energy plans, other things that you, the Planning Commission, deem the citizens of Bristol are interested in, and it's something that you're interested in taking on. So this is a housing goal, which is, I think, appropriate for this evening. And we're going to work on the regulatory aspects. A non-regulatory aspect would be forming a housing committee to really understand the needs of the community and to try and promote opportunities. So we have an example of an ADU. And it's alternative dwelling unit. It's not alternative, accessory dwelling unit. Goodness, sorry, senior moment. An accessory dwelling unit. Accessory dwelling units can be difficult, especially in towns without sewer systems, because there is the local zoning piece, and they're probably the easiest part of it. The fire marshal and the wastewater. State wastewater division can be some of the more complicated parts. So a housing committee could help people understand kind of the financial ramifications of an accessory dwelling unit, and really can someone make a cash flow for themselves? Because I'd say, unless someone's really altruistic, nobody's going to take another family or unit into their home unless they think they're going to have a positive cash flow influence. And there are exceptions to that. There are family members and there are, exchange students, but ultimately I think the economics are what will drive most of it. And those can be daunting between, bank loans and contractors and leases for tenants and taking in tenants. So that's just an example of something a housing committee might help somebody with. We have basically supporting the economy, local scales economy. Understand what the community wants. Tax incentives, you already have a downtown designation that entitles you to, you guys talked earlier about downtown transportation grants, which are available through the downtown program and are actually, there's a lot of money in that program this year, in particular, the downtown transportation program. There are also tax incentives. So for one of the reasons to be in the downtown program is if someone wants to improve their facade of their building within your designated downtown, there are tax credits that can help with that. So again, non-regulatory way would be to promote those to some of your citizens or businesses for groups.
Oops.
And you don't have to take this all on. You can find partners like your downtown business district. Another natural resources we talked again about, you know, you guys could be the planners for, I don't know if Bristol has a town forest.
Down with large blocks of conserved forest land.
Yeah, but you don't have a town forest in particular, but if you did, and there are lots of towns in Addison County that do, you know, you all could create a management plan for that, and whether it involved forestry or whether, and creating, using that to create trails, or whether it involved conservation, that could be something that you all could get involved with in your concert, or your conservation commission could do it. Next one, please. So transportation system, and really you can see we're following the goals in your plan. These examples are all to give you kind of a purview of the breadth of the non-regulatory planning that you all have the ability to do. So you do have a Safe Routes to School program in Bristol. We've talked about V-Trans grants before, so I think I'll just move through that pretty quickly. Capital budget program, again, this is something that is directly under your select board's purview. They control basically the purse, but they may not have time to do the planning, to basically create a capital budget, or to think about the town forest or the rec committee or things of that nature. That could be a void that you chose to play, or a role that you chose to play, a void that you chose to fill. Next one, please.
I have no more.
You have no more. Okay, good. So like I say, we are in basically the implementation phase of your plan, and our goal here tonight is to work specifically on housing and implement the housing goals that we took from your plan earlier. So Kevin, I sent you a couple of notes. I sent you a couple of papers this afternoon.
Yeah.
You want those up as well?
I would.
I think
Perfect.
I did send it out to everybody on board here, and you probably should have a copy if you want to refer to it, or Chris is going to pull it out.
If Chris would pull it up, that would be fabulous. The demographics first. And this is a very high level overview of demographics, and it's really just demographics that deal with housing, and I think that are important to basically the discussions that we're going to have from here on out. So I didn't want to, so what I did was I looked at both the census, the 2020 census, and I looked at a market analysis for Stony Hill that had been done. ACCT was nice enough to allow me to use it. I have it here. They really don't want it going a lot further than you. So what I did was basically take the conclusions. It's probably a 70-page study or so, but I'm hoping that I hit kind of the highlights that are important to this conversation that we're going to have. So I'd start at the very beginning, the conclusions from the executive summary. At least in February of 2021, they determined that Bristol had basically a 0 vacancy rate, rental housing vacancy rate. And that rental, it's about 25% of Bristol's housing supply is rentals. We can talk about it, but I think the rest of the demographic profile will show you that it's very possible it should be a significantly larger percentage of Bristol's housing offerings.
Is that, excuse me, is that a high or low? By other stand, I have no idea. I had no idea that this was the Bristol number.
Yeah.
How does that compare to, I don't know,
Let's go
Middlebury, Waitsfield, or Anyplace else? Just
So I'm
roughly,
gonna tell you, it's roughly a little lower than the county average. So I think the
Okay.
county average is about 27. And Bristol's at 25, so it's comparable,
yeah,
but a little lower.
okay.
While we're talking about that, 6% of Bristol's housing supply is mobile homes, and generally in the county, it's about 7%. So again, pretty close, not significantly different from a lot of other places. But when we start looking at the population numbers, again, that's what suggests to me anyway, that perhaps there is significantly higher rental demand. So just back to the conclusions from the executive summary. With a 0% rate vacancy rate, there is going to be high demand. There are going to be people looking for housing. Small household sizes is the other real takeaway. And you can see down below, I have households and average household size. So in 2010, this is the market area. This isn't Bristol. I didn't get households for Bristol specifically. The market area is basically within a 15-mile drive shed of Bristol. You can see the households are going up and projected to go up. It's largely driven by the household size going down. So if you look at Bristol's population above 2000, it was, and these are census numbers, 3788, 2010, 3894, 2020, 3842. It's actually down a little bit in the town of Bristol. Not significantly, but the studies takeaway, the market studies takeaway was the recent stabilization of the town's population is clearly related to both an aging population, declining household size, and a lack of new housing developed in recent years. And I think they also did have housing starts. I didn't put it on here, but from 2015 to about 2020, you had very few housing starts, like 3, 4, 5 a year. And Chris can probably speak to that.
That's changed dramatically in the last 3 years.
Yep.
To about 15 a year.
Okay. Great. So significant growth in the elderly population, but also in 35 to 45. And those are two very different demographics. Your elderly population, and I thought I put that 62% of, well, 62% of the households in Bristol are 1 or 2 people. 35% of the heads of households are over 62 years of age. So, and that number with the baby boom is just going to go up for the next at least 5 years or so, getting over the age of 62. So I want you to think about those numbers again. 62% of households in Bristol are 1 to 2 people. 35% of heads of household are over 62 years old. So you can see the declining household size. You know, basically from the demographics that the baby boomers are aging, and so the average age of Bristol is projected to continue to age. It's not necessarily, you know, a 3-bedroom house that's going to be the best answer to the current market. The current market is going to be made up of much more, or has much more of a need for 1 or 2 bedrooms.
So I have a
Just
question.
as an assertion, as a landlord, I can tell you in 2020 and 2021, if I had had 10 new good largish 1-bedroom apartments every 6 months, those 2 years, I would rent them all with no trouble whatsoever in Bristol. That's changed in 2022, but it's softened up, but it was crazy those couple of years. And there's nothing for people in that department, or very little.
So So I guess in maybe this is a more detailed discussion, but the desire, the habit, the perception that a 3-bedroom house is a piece of property to have versus the fact that people in these in Bristol don't need but 1 or 2-bedroom houses, there's a third or places, if you will. There's a conflict there. How do you get through that 3-bedroom mentality? Or if you have a 3-bedroom, how do you deal with that and make it into something that's
Yes.
a higher use?
I would say 90% of the new home starts here in the last 5 years have been 3+ bedroom. We don't build small houses.
There's the economics of it where it doesn't make sense to build 1 or 2 bedrooms instead of, for a little bit more, you can build a 4-bedroom, plus the permitting of it and everything else.
And the banks often will not loan you money to build anything less than a 3-bedroom home.
Really? But anyway, I don't.
They look at resale value and they think, oh, 1 or 2-bedroom place doesn't have the value.
If that's a follow-on conversation or if it's something.
Well, it's an important conversation for us to have right now, because if we are looking to revise your regulations, if we're thinking of how do we revise your regulations to improve the ability to create housing within, again, the village planning area, then the purpose of the market study and the market discussion is, well, what type of housing is most in demand? What is the market showing that will sell most easily? What people want, what people desire, what people can afford. And I guess I would suggest to you that that's probably the type of housing that you should consider enabling.
So I work with the developers all the time, and in multiple communities, and I refer to them as starter under house. So the 1-2 bedroom between 800 and 1,200 square foot homes, ranch, single story. One of the highest demand things. It's what I hear people wanting all the time. Nobody's building them. There's too many barriers, and to build that home now, it's pushing up on 300,000 with land. It's not an affordable house. So if you're going to go that way, if you're going to go that much, you might as well go for the gusto, and that's what we're seeing them do for the most part.
And the market's tight enough so that if a builder can find a client that will pay for a 4-bedroom house or a 5-bedroom house with a lot of amenities, then their margins are going to be better, and they'll take it. So it
I know it's anecdotal, I suppose, but for some reason, I seem to be in my shop, so many people, when they come and they're looking to move to Bristol, continually I hear, we're looking for a small place. We don't want a large home. People are also thinking smaller for economy and the cost of heating and
Upkeep.
and maintenance. And there are a number of people who have moved to Bristol or right around Bristol that wanted to move to the village, but they couldn't. So they ended up being outside the village. But they really wanted that part of the appeal for them to move here after they visited is that they want to live in the village, be able to walk to amenities, walk to businesses, and they end up having to go outside or find a little bit of land and build their own smaller home. So I've heard a lot of comments about that.
I mean, a great example of that process started about 4 years ago, where the firehouse apartments are ending up as we speak. Kevin's vision for those was to put in a small row house in a series of single family and duplexes, 15 total units. That's what was approved. That was the vision. Keep them small, 1 and 2 bedroom units, keep them cost effective, try to get them as close to net zero, and again, try to keep them affordable. it was an unrealistic pipe dream. In the end, as we know, he sold the project to Evernorth, who then has converted that from single family ownership homes to a 18 or 20 unit rental facility. So he had pie in the sky with it. He had already thrown a lot of money as far as the Act 250 aspect and a lot of the development in the area. So it wasn't like he was starting on raw dirt either. There was a lot of the development that had already been done. So he was hoping to keep them in that 250 range, and he couldn't get in lower than 275. And that was scrapping things like some of the energy efficiency aspects of it. So that's just a realistic example of what went down in the last few years here in our town.
Yeah, and you all are not going to be able to change the market. And right now, the housing market is very expensive. I've heard numbers around $300 a square foot. So even for 1,000-foot ranch, that's a $300,000 house. You can't change that, but you can, or what hopefully we will be able to do with these regulations is recognize some of the market need and make sure that those people can build those places in the inappropriate places within. And again, we're looking at the village of Bristol.
Adam, do you have numbers about where the rental percentage is sustainable? With our current housing supply, you say it's 25% is rental, and that there's clearly a need there or a want there, or however you want to say that. Is there a number that's any information that they know once it hits this percentage of the housing stock is rental, that, you know, communities start to change or decline, or you see a outflow or anything like that? Just
That's a really good question, Robin. I do not have anything like that. So I don't know per se if there's a formula as to what percentage of housing in any given community should be rental. But let me see if I can give you a better answer, because I don't know it now.
I think also turnover of those rentals would play a factor. I mean, we moved here from Virginia in a military town, military area, and the rentals just over and over, 6 months, a year, they're always turning over. And it seems like we have a lot of people, especially kind of in the downtown area, that are renting, that have been there for years. And they're not, if the percentage goes up, but they're people that are invested in the town and they live there for years, then I think that's different than if it's a higher percentage of rentals, but they're being turned over constantly.
That matches my experience. I've had downtown renters some 10, 13, 14 years because they like being downtown and whatever attributes they like about being downtown. It works for them and they stay. To me, I think it seems like there's a bit of a block in the market too, because older folks who may be living alone in a house where they raised a family earlier, maybe living alone or with their spouse late in life, have nowhere to go to stay in the community. So they stay in the big house when that house could maybe be repurposed to a young family or something. And we've seen that over the last half dozen years, where a lot of village houses have turned over to young families whose parents of the kids were acting like chauffeurs all the time to get the kids to social and school activities and that sort of thing. They decided they'd rather live in town. But I still think there's probably a lot of larger, older homes that could be better purposed to family life if there were a place for people to go in the community. So I don't know, we could perhaps consider what, if anything, we could do to encourage that sort of development. Starter and finisher homes really is what I think about, and maybe free up some of the more family-sized existing units. I don't know.
So that's a great thought, and I guess I'm gonna stay on just the demographics for just about 2 more minutes, and then we'll move over to kind of our list of things that you, the Planning Commission, have control over, and that we will take a look at as part of this process. So really, I talked about a rental household, 72% had 1 to 2 people, 96% had 3 people or less. So, again, it's only the rental market, but it's a significant number, and I think it's largely driven by the seniors that you all just talked about. No,
No, I mean, our largest rental blocks, there's a chunk downtown, but we also have, on Lover's Lane, we have a large apartment complex. There's a handful of Daniel's Four Corners. In the village itself, we also run into, which is senior housing on Mount Street. There's 8 units there. So, like, the Woodland Apartments is not predominantly senior. You're seeing more young, more single or couples with or without children. So, and in the rentals, I have a question on that. Are the mobile homes considered part of the rental market?
it depends.
Right. So, like, KTP is in the 3 ACT trailer park mobile home parks in Bristol. The lots are rented, but the homes are owned. Would that fall in our 25% rental, or is that the 6% mobile home number? Do we know?
That's the 6% mobile home number. It's not the rental number per se.
Okay.
So I just have a comment about the rental is, I think in one aspect of that, because of the smaller sizes, may very well because you typically see 1 and 2 bedroom apartments for rent and very seldom see 3 bedroom houses or apartments. I think those numbers may be driven down, if you will, just by the number of bedrooms that are typically rented, as opposed to.
You think the inventory is driving the available inventory is driving the number, not necessarily as much as the demand driving.
I would raise that as a question if it is.
I mean, I look at the Firehouse Apartments. I mean, ACCT spent a lot, and Evernorth spent a lot of time figuring out what the right size and scope and scale of that project is. Most of those are 1 bedroom apartments. There's a few 2 bedrooms and 1 or 2 3 bedrooms, but it's predominantly 1 bedroom units they're renting. So they see that as the huge need. These numbers sugar that out as well.
Well, and I'm quoting a lot from their market analysis. So,
But one question I have is, so if 1 bedroom apartment is a single person or a couple, in 5 years, is that couple going to want and need to move to something bigger because they've had 2 kids? And is that going to, I just, projecting future is a little hard here. You can see maybe really the baby boom is past.
births are down since 2008.
So,
Well, we're experiencing a situation right now personally where our renters were a couple. Now they have a little bambino and they're moving to get closer to family out of state. So
well,
so that
yeah,
once you start a family, a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment may not necessarily be attractive.
so I'm just wondering where that's hard to predict, but if they're young couples, presumably, I'm guessing a lot of them will be having kids and then they'll be looking for something bigger.
That was my wife and I. I mean, we had a small condo, bought a house, because we needed the bedroom space.
Well, and it's a normal progression, right? Younger people tend to be renters and older people tend to be renters. And that's kind of your demographic. I would say, Chris talked a little bit about the makeup that they chose, that Firehouse Apartments chose, and they expected to be fully leased in 2 to 3 months. So basically they expected, their market study said, we're going to sell out basically immediately, and that there is a demand here. So
the other piece with that too, that is part of those apartments, they are income sensitive apartments as well. So that it's a very specific demographic they're aiming at as well.
Mhm.
So it's low income housing, it's subsidized housing, so. It's, not everyone's gonna qualify to go to rent though, so it's adding some housing to our market, but it may not be addressing the double income, no kid couple that's looking for an apartment to rent in the village.
So before we move on, is this pretty much your presentation? I would like to just go around table for comments before we go to your next.
Yeah, yes, please.
So let's just go around table a minute here, and if there's any closing comments or concerns or questions. And start with John, you.
Yeah, I would just say this is really, these numbers, like these demographic numbers are really interesting to me. And being a landlord, being in the business, I can see the stresses and the strains and the demands, and they ebb and flow. You know, I mean, if you had talked to me 20 years ago, I would have told you that the bloom is off residential and it's on commercial. And that changed, you know, a couple of times in the last 20 years. It's sort of a cycle. But I think the emphasis is on residential for the time being, for the foreseeable future. All of this, though, suggests to me that, you know, when we created the village planning area and really reserved that for house expansion of the village fabric, so that we can, you know, have housing in particular close to the main street. You know, to me, when you go through this, Adam, it suggests to me that we should be very protective of that village planning area and its intended purpose from the start, which was to really encourage, you know, to retain the closest and best places for housing to happen. Because Bristol's town plan puts a strong emphasis on maintaining the fabric of the village and having a walkable and you know, a good viable downtown that's walkable from lots of places in the village or close to it. And you know, that's why we put a circle around the village planning area and created something called the village planning area, and why it got 2/3, you know, 66% support from the town in the town plan that they approved the first time it was considered, because people like what Bristol is. And the village planning area is about creating more space for that. So I hope we'll be very protective of that and not weaken the village planning area, as I think, in my opinion, the Planning Commission did back in 2020. But so I, for one, will be looking to, you know, protect close-in areas for housing primarily.
Okay, Melissa? Any comments or further questions?
I had one, but now I've forgotten it. I will circle back around. Let me see if I can remember what it was.
Okay, Jeff?
No, I think that, you know, your data just confirms what we already had in the town plan, which on demographics, which said more and smaller households. That's where we're going. And that has a clear impact on housing.
Okay, Rob?
No, it's good to see these numbers. Obviously, it's just a small snippet, and there's many more numbers that are not there if you try to get a full picture of it. But these are good and helpful. These things that we're talking about get very dicey when you start talking about repurposing homes and that sort of thing, because you basically telling people they should leave their home and move somewhere else so that somebody else can use what they have. And I know I wouldn't be too ready to leave my home just because somebody else thought it was too big for me. So there's a lot to this. And the other thing is about growing density and maintaining the village and everything else. You can't really, if you're looking at growing the village, you can't grow it just by adding housing and not business as well, because you need something to attract the people and maintain them here. Otherwise, it's a bedroom community and everybody's driving in and out every day, going everywhere else to work. So there's a balance to it somewhere, and that's what we need to find.
Hey, thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I look forward to some good discussions resulting from our different points of view and this data that we'll be using. I do believe it's important to do our best to make sure that it's affordable to build new housing, affordable for people to make use of their property and not lose too many of the rights. But I also believe we can find a good balance as we face the future. I think one issue that's been overlooked in nationwide the past couple of years, past probably 3 or 4 years, is the enormous amount of public debt we're accumulating, and it was accumulated at very low interest rates. And those interest rates are going to start to rise, already have, and that's going to put a squeeze on government budgets, on personal budgets, and on organization budgets. And we'll have to adjust with it.
Okay, so on to the next topic, I guess. Is that a good way to say it?
Great, yes. Actually, we're gonna go, Chris, you were gonna talk a little bit about your ARPA survey as it related to housing.
Sure. Let me get back to. Okay. So Rob and myself both sit on the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee. The snippet, as you all know, we have $1 million+ of federal money that we can spend on our community. One of the big ways that we got that we felt was important to drive that was community involvement and input. We did a series of outreach processes. We did focus groups with there was town. We did one with the town. We did some with business owners. We did some with school. There were a handful of focus groups. We also had. I hope most of you took advantage of it. There were comic postcards all over town to fill out and drop in, which we got lots of those. And we did a spaghetti dinner. Come sit down, tell us what you want. The long and short of it, the biggest thing that we saw, the two large items that came to the surface repeatedly were affordable housing and childcare. And we're trying to tackle that. One of the things we discussed quite a few times is we aren't certain that $1 million can fix the housing crisis in Bristol. But we also discussed what could we use parts of it to figure out a way to start chipping away at the problem. So in the housing demographic piece, I would say over half of the responses responded as far as affordable housing. The focus groups, I would say 25% of the time was spent on housing. So it's right in everyone's radar. Everyone knows that we've got an issue. No one really talked about housing stock. It was more affordable housing, which was sort of unique. Would you say that's a fair assessment, Rob?
Yeah, a lot of the comments were pretty vague in that, the comment was affordable housing. So nothing in terms of economically affordable or middle income affordable or classified as affordable housing that's supported through one of the other programs, so it's pretty broad. And so, yeah, I would say that that's fair.
Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, it's your survey. So again, shows you that you all are right on point. So now I do want to go to kind of a list of topics, tools. Preliminary list, yes. Yeah. And it's preliminary because if there are things that you all believe that we are missing, then I want to hear about them. So I created the list, some from what's obvious, some from basically your grant, and there are some requirements in your grant that you look at some things which make sense, and then there were some other ideas that I had. So I've asked Chris to chime in. I'm going to give you an example from ACCT, and what they said they'd like to see for changes, and then I'd basically open the floor to all of you for other ideas. So let's see, in order to aid development of more housing of more types, we'll investigate the following issues within the Bristol Unified Development Regulations. Well, some items apply across all zoning districts. Within zoning districts, we'll limit our investigation to only those zones that lie within the village planning area. So your parking requirements basically apply everywhere, whereas dimensional requirements or density requirements are specific to zones. Where things are specific to zones, we'll look at them in just the zones in the village planning area. Where they apply across zones, we'll just look at that particular section of your regulations. So we're going to start with density, and again, the density of the districts within the village planning area. You've got a number of them. Some are designated as mixed use, some are high density residential, some are basically downtown block or kind of more business focused, and some are lower density residential. We'll take a look at the density in all of those and basically decide whether or not how you feel about that density. We're also, one of the things that I will bring you at your next meeting will be a map. And earlier, Kevin mentioned a Bristol density study that the Vermont Forum on Sprawl did for you in 2007. So I have that. We'll put it on a big map of basically your parcels and show that a little bit. So show what the existing density of the existing village was as of 2007. So as of 15 years ago. Maybe how that's evolved a little bit. We'll try and highlight some of the things that have changed. I think you'll find Bristol Village has not changed, at least in the core, that significantly. You've had a couple of projects that I can think of, but by and large, a lot of your streets are still, the housing density anyway, is still pretty similar to what it's historically been.
I think if I could interject, I think we've talked about that plan in the from an aspect of change in uses as opposed to physical changes too, which over that last 15 years, things have come and gone as to some unique uses within those areas.
Yep. So we're going to focus largely on housing. But you're right, the next so density is one of the things that we will look at first. And with density, we will look at kind of dimensional standards. Do the dimensional standards in your current zoning match kind of the fabric of the different neighborhoods and the different zoning districts? Does everybody understand what I mean by that? Okay, good. Because if they don't, we would like to reduce nonconformities, basically make Chris's job easier so that people can do things with their properties, so that their properties are matched to kind of the historical structure that's been there. Next, we're going to move on to uses, which is what you just brought up, Kevin. So allowable housing types. What types of uses are appropriate, and specifically housing uses are appropriate in what districts? So we'll talk about duplexes. We'll talk about multifamily units, and multifamily can be that can be a big block, right? A multifamily could be 3, or a multifamily could be 33, or anything in between. So maybe one of the ways to deal with it is break multifamily down as a class of uses. Here, just as an example, I use less than 6, greater than 6. That's something that you all will, if you want to go that way, that's something that you all will decide. And again, all types of ADUs will look specifically at your accessory dwelling unit regulations and see whether or not they're working, whether or not people are creating them. If they are creating them, what are the impacts, and what you how you as the Planning Commission feel they should work, what we should change. Let's see. Then we'll look at the review processes. So whether something's a conditional use, i.e. the first question is, so the difference between a site plan and a conditional use. First, site plan does not apply to basically single family homes and duplexes, but can apply to multifamily dwellings. The big distinction between site plan review and conditional use review is the first question you ask in conditional use review is this appropriate in this area? If you find it's appropriate in that area, I would tell you the second half of the investigations in conditional use are all site plan related. They're kind of exactly the same thing. So if you can get rid of some things as conditional use and not ask that first question, is this appropriate in this area? This is permitted in this area. It may, I guess, ease the regulatory burden from the local regs, and those are things that are in your control. And then elements of the site, what the site plan, that's what's required. And so are they working for you, basically? And I hope Chris will help us with that part of the conversation, since he's the one closest to enforcing these things. Other things that I have down: parking, PUDs, planned unit developments. How well are those working for you? Your subdivision regulations, we did those 3 years ago, plus 4 years ago. How have those been working? Are there things in your subdivision process that works, doesn't work, helps housing, doesn't help housing? And then number 7 is basically other. It's what other ideas. So John brought up noise ordinances earlier. I should probably put in again the kind of the drive and road standard ordinances. But it's things of that nature that you all have the ability to change or to suggest to the select board that they change, that we can include that help. So it's a lot of little steps that are within your control that hopefully overall encourage people to develop housing within Bristol.
Adam,
Yes, John.
I know that as presented here in this outline, we're really talking about housing and housing type uses. But since we are predominantly focusing on the village planning area, and since of all uses, housing or otherwise, not every use is compatible with residential zones, and the village planning area recognizes that in various ways already. I think we ought to review the non-housing uses as well, because if we want to create a zone where housing is encouraged and we want certain density to be chosen, and we want certain kinds of development, certain places within the village planning area, and then we want to consider, I think, also adjacent property uses. And there may not be some there. We already know there's some that are not appropriate for residential zones. So as long as we're focused on more housing, then we should also focus on all the uses, including those that might discourage housing, even if housing is allowed in an area. You follow me?
I absolutely understand what you're saying. I think that's a decision for all of you to make. It's a little bit of scope creep for me. But the other part of the answer is I understand how it, so if we can keep it, I don't want to go through every use in the whole area, but if we can keep it narrowly focused on impact on houses, then I'm happy to, and that's what the Planning Commission wants. I'm happy to facilitate that discussion for you all.
It might be a quick review. We might find, oh, there's nothing there that is incompatible with housing, but it's worth looking at.
It may just be a natural shakeout anyways. If I think as this process moves forward and the housing changes are discovered, or areas where you want to see changes in density, there may not be large incompatibilities just because of the nature of where we're thinking the housing growth should be. And then there's certain things where that aren't currently allowed. I actually go the other way with it, John. I think there's things that we don't allow in our housing districts that if we want to grow our village in our walkability, we need to allow more of. Or allow things, like in the high density residential, you can do almost no business work. But that's what we want to see, and as the village grows, it'd be nice to have a market on both ends of the town. So you could walk to either store, but we can't do that right now. Our zoning doesn't allow it. So I think there's current uses that may be incompatible, and there's current non-uses that should be allowed, if that makes sense.
If I could interject, that comment might be a little bit backdated or a fear from the past of compatibility. And I think we really need to be careful with that as we go through this process. So I guess, Adam, should we just kind of roll around again and see everybody a chance, or do you have more comments? Or more, to present? I'm sorry,
So really, that's the list that I wanted to present to you, and the ideas of basically where we're going. So, the last two meetings, we've kind of set the stage as to our authority and roles and responsibility, and basically implementation steps and where we're going. And we've talked about the demographics and the need, and we've talked about the things that kind of the list of things that we can focus on, that you, the planning commission, can control to look at housing. And so now I'm moving forward, we'll actually really start the work of making changes and implementing it. With that, I'm happy to hear basically other ideas of places that we need to focus to improve your regulations for housing.
Okay, Jeff, you want to kick it off?
Sure, a couple of comments. One, we've just said generally, I think it just goes shorter to say we want to figure out how to get more housing, but it's a little more detailed than that. We want more flexible and affordable housing. It's not just more housing. We know that. Second, I am interested in how, especially in how roads and parking affects housing here, because Bristol seems unique to me in that basically we don't have on-street parking in the village area. There's one or two, like in front of the library, there's 2 spots, but basically you can't park on the street. It's illegal. Can't impede traffic, which means parking in the street. And
come winter, it's even more complicated.
And pardon me, and yeah, in winter it's even more complicated. So I think there's a connection there. If we're going to get more housing, how does parking come into that? The other thing is, and this is related then to just the changing nature of things. It's not just housing that's changing, but like commercial uses are changing, right? So right now, the stationery store in Middlebury is closing, and the stationery store in Bristol is closing, and no one wants to run a stationery store. And I actually talked to a business owner and said, "Are you crazy? No one would do that today." So something else is going to happen there, but it's the character of the town. The commercial character is changing and will change more. That's just a comment, but it strikes me that impacts the whole character. And it's very hard to predict what's going to happen here.
Yeah, it's very interesting on that. Like we could, like the history of Bristol, there's a section on like what Main Street has been, all the different stores. And I mean, just recently, we had a paint store and a liquor store and a auto parts store on Main Street.
And a shoe and clothing store.
Yeah, in the last 15 years. So now we don't see those. And so I agree, the evolution is important to try to keep an eye on as well.
Rob, do you have any thoughts?
No, I don't have anything else this time.
Bill, are you still here?
Some people think so. Yes,
Oh, you're off I apologize, you're off our screen somehow.
okay. I
think so, Bill.
well, thank you. No, I have nothing to add at this point. Thank you for asking, Kevin.
Okay, and then John, you've
No, I think I've had my
given-
say. Thanks. I just
Okay.
wanted to flag those few things earlier that I mentioned, and I won't repeat them here, but I think this will be a great process.
Okay, thanks. And then Melissa,
No, I was just wondering if it would be a good idea if each of us just, step back, look at it and write down the like top 10 or top 5 things that we really want to see. And then just put them all together, and discuss them as opposed to just like trying to think off the top of my head right now, I don't know if anybody's up for doing that. Kind of be a little more specific in what it is you'd like to see.
I'd like to do that.
that's a good point. As we start discussing the details, obviously,
Right.
we're going to want to be thinking in that mode.
I mean, I know just generally when we were talking about, we need the businesses as well as the housing, but for businesses to come to Bristol, there has to be more available housing for people that want to work here and they want they want to be able to hire people, and they can't do that if there's nowhere affordable for people to live. So, it kind of is just hand in hand.
Okay. Are we down to next steps or have we covered that?
So I was gonna give Chris an opportunity to make some suggestions.
So one of the big ones that over the last few years and it addresses housing almost directly, and it was on the list here, is accessory dwelling units. There's a big put, everyone, it seems like, who calls my office that's looking at buying a house wants to know if they can put in an apartment. Once they're told what the accessory dwelling unit rules are, it's not necessarily what they want. So, but part of me is the intent of an accessory dwelling unit we used to call them in-law apartments. It's a small apartment. If we want to increase rental capabilities, we need to look at expanding duplex use or even triplexes on existing larger homes. And that's more what people really want to do. They want to be able to cut their house in half and create a 2-bedroom apartment, which they can't do. You're limited to 1 bedroom. And density also runs into that. We have 1/4 acre density, 1 dwelling unit per 1/4 acre. A duplex is 2 dwelling units, so you need a 1/2 acre to build a duplex. Those are things I see on if not weekly, every other week, somebody is asking about how can I create another rental piece or another living space in my property. That's probably the number one thing. The other one that has come up a few times is the discussion on multifamily houses. The concept of condos versus rental units, and how do you promote one versus the other? They're very different beasts. I was just talking with the builder the other day that they would love to build some quadplex, like condo type units, but the acreage required doesn't allow for it. They'd have to get such a large parcel of land to do such a thing. So playing around with some of that and figuring out how we can create some bonusing or some flexibility in that type of growth. So those are the 2 biggies that I hear on a regular basis from a housing standpoint.
Question, there is, I believe, a by right use now with certain, is it ADUs or is it duplexes or what is the line between what has recently come by right for multi-use and?
So any place that a single family home is allowed, a accessory dwelling unit is allowed, and that is state statute, I believe. That's correct. There are certain minimum rules that the state put in place as far as size, and there's 4 or 5 criteria that they have to meet. That's the by right use that has changed in the last couple of years from the state level. You don't count an accessory dwelling unit against your density. That's the biggest difference between an accessory dwelling unit and a duplex. But an accessory dwelling unit is a 1 bedroom. It can only be up to 900 square feet or 30% of the living capacity. You have to have adequate wastewater. So there's a lot of steps that get added to it. That make it, instead of converting the garage into an accessory dwelling unit. Does that answer your question, Kevin?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Is there a limit on, like, if you already have, say, a duplex on the property, you can't then put an ADU on there as well?
Correct. It actually, the other requirement is it has to be part of a single family home. It cannot be part of it. It cannot be added to a property that has anything beyond, anything greater than a single family dwelling.
And there's a size limitation, did you say, to ADUs?
Yep, 30% of the livable space or 900 square feet, whichever is larger. I mean, 1,000 square feet, whichever is larger. In Bristol, I get Bristol starts from, I mean, Moncton backwards. One's 900, one's 1,000. There are some size limitations, and it is limited to 1 bedroom in Bristol
For ADU.
for ADU.
So that's not a
But
state
that-
requirement.
That's
a local
a
requirement.
town.
No, the state requirement is 1 bedroom.
That it
Yeah.
can only be 1 bedroom.
Correct.
Yes.
For-
So
for-
they don't want people shirking the duplex laws to create these ADUs, which is. So it's more, figure out how to allow more duplexes. And then let's do it right. Because unfortunately, some of the ADUs we're seeing built are sort of, for lack of better terms, half-ass workarounds. So that they can get a rental property, a rental onto the property. And that doesn't work. Go ahead, Melissa.
For single family homes on a, whatever the minimum of the land is, or whatever, is there a minimum square footage that house has to be?
No.
No? Okay. So I mean, but you need a certain amount of land per single family. So what I'm saying is there are some few of homes here, houses that probably someone would want to buy it and just knock it down and build a new home. But would it be possible for them to build 2 small homes, single family, not attached, on that property? That's, to me, that's helping with density, but it's just making smaller homes on 1 lot instead of 2, instead of single one.
I mean, if the density was changed, you can go through a PUD process. And basically you're creating a 2-unit condominium, whether they're attached or not.
Oh, because it's on it's, the land is not enough. It's not the minimum for individual.
You still have to, if you want to put 2 housing units in the village, you need a ½ acre. You need a ¼ acre for every dwelling unit you build right now.
Okay.
For the village proper. And that increases as you go outward. It's sort of a bullseye, for lack of a better term.
Right. And I can't remember, I'm sorry, but how far down the main street are we talking about, is the village proper that we're talking about? I can't.
Let me
I'm
pull up a
sorry.
map. No, that's all good. Give me 2 seconds. Let me just pull up a map for you. I think. Maybe.
So
There it goes.
this conversation reflects really where we're going to be going over the next several months. We're going to look at the densities and say, well, what can you do on this size? Does that work? Does that not work?
Or is it something we can change?
Is it something you can change? Absolutely.
Does it go past Basin?
The village planning area, so there's 2, and that's why I'm pulling up this map here for you.
Yep.
There's 2 things to make sure that we keep in mind here. So here's the map. You all can see the map?
Yeah. Just
Okay.
can't really see where it ends.
I just want you to see it first as a perspective.
Right.
This orange red dashed line sort of box around it, that is the entire village planning area that we're talking about.
Okay.
And also Rockydale area is part of the village planning area. So as we zoom in,
Okay.
the dark or the teal blue, the darker teal is what we call our high density area. That's the half acre zone. That's our classic village. The dark red right in the center,
Mhm.
that's right here where we're sitting at Holly Hall. That's Main Street. To
Okay,
the cat park. Lengthwise, it ends short of Basin Street.
okay,
And then we have the orange down the middle, that's our ROC district, that's residential office commercial. And then the hash marks are village mix, which is just adds a mix of stuff. And the baby blue is what we call village residential, which is half acre zoning. And then we have some conservation land, like this one little chunk down in the corner here that's part of this, which is 25 acre zoning, but we'll leave that out for the moment.
Yeah.
Wanted people to see the perspective of, when we talk about the village, most people think we're talking like just this blue area. The village planning area extends out to 116 to the west, down to Hewitt Road is sort of both sides of Hewitt Road, out as far as the Lord's Prayer Rock. Up north, it stops at we've got it's where Heffernan Shop is right there, whatever the name of that road is. And runs again almost all the way to Burpee, Burpee Road.
Murphy Road, yeah. The Rockydale area, that is part of the planning
Yeah.
area,
So
okay.
Then we got that little
Where I am.
outcrop in Rockydale. So. I just
Okay,
want
because
people
of
to have
the apartments here and there's various, yeah, okay.
and each one of those colors has their own dimensional standards. So.
Right, okay,
How big the lots can be, building sizes, densities, that changes in every one of these zones. So I want to be clear with people that it's not just one broad, village planning area is X. As Adam mentioned earlier, we have a lot of zones here that we're gonna have to
so
look
we'll
at.
get we can get a key to it to let us know exactly what the zoning areas
is-
are.
Yeah, this is in the village plan, so you can refer to the village plan. It gives you all the zones, it gives you all the requirements, it gives you all the setbacks.
Okay, okay,
It gives you a key for all the different zones, so
all right,
if you've got homework desires, that would be a great one.
And what I can do as well, and it's fairly quick to do, is I can send out a document. It'll be this map, and I'll break out the individual zones that are involved here, and what their dimensional standards and uses are. It's right out of our zoning document. I'm just going to cut and paste it and create
that
sort
would be
of
great,
a
thank you.
packet so that we all have everything on the same page, if that makes sense.
That's good.
I'll have that out by the end of the week for you all.
Okay, we're on overtime. I don't want to kick you out, but I don't want to keep you all night either.
No, I'm basically, we've laid all the groundwork now, I would say, to the kind of why we're doing it and what we're doing over the next few months. So next time I am here, and that's the only other thing we should do. When do you want me back? We will start basically looking at densities of zones. So looking at the map that Chris sends out and the existing zoning, and determine whether or not it works for Bristol or it needs to be changed, and if it needs to be changed, how.
So I guess I would throw, do we want to huddle as a group to kibitz a little bit between the next meeting with Adam, or do we want to go right into that in
Well, if we can,
November?
if everybody writes up kind of an idea of what they are, what each of us are kind of looking for, I think that would be helpful to kind of talk about that amongst
Okay.
ourselves,
Uh,
maybe next time.
So I'm getting mixed signals here, so. What's the pleasure?
My preference is
we-
always to jump right in and try to get things moving and get things done.
Okay. So we'll figure out something for November, what it sounds like.
Which day? What
Um,
day is your meeting in November?
Well,
Typically, it's the first.
Typically, well, we had a conflict with third, and I don't know if we still do. Or-
No. So we had a conflict this month for Adam and
The first.
Next month, the election Tuesday, is that what's,
That's it.
that's,
No, November 1st is the first Tuesday.
Yeah,
November 8th is election day. That's the next Tuesday.
okay, so we're safe,
So what
but that's
day?
only 2 weeks out.
that's true.
And I'm
Not
gonna be
election night,
away.
please.
No.
The first Tuesday,
Yeah.
you're gonna be out,
November 1st, I'll be away.
so should we keep it
You want to?
15th.
third?
So I would go for the 3rd, like the 15th,
Okay,
would be my suggestion.
I'll make a note. You want me to change the website, that that'll be your standard night going
do we
forward?
want to just start using that again?
What?
We did that, we changed it at one point because there were conflicts with the third, but maybe we don't have those anymore.
I don't believe there's any.
I'm fine.
Let me just go double check on the calendar out front, just to make sure I'm not missing something. I'll be right back.
Are we making any sense yet?
Yep.
Not wanting to sound snarky, but I'm gonna be in the Florida Keys on November 1st.
Very nice.
So, ooh, I've got a conflict on the 15th. By the looks of things here. Why is that? It shouldn't be. Let's plan it for the 15th.
Okay, great. So thank you all for tonight, and I will come back and join you on the 15th. And we will dive into basically the list of topics that we can make changes to.
Thanks, Adam.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Peggy, Peggy, did you get the list of attendees?
Yes, I got everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect.
So then I guess the next thing is, thank you, Adam, if you don't have to hang around, but we'll have public comment next, if there's any public comment. Doesn't look like it. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just 1 second, sorry to prolong this. Chris, I don't know if you have talked funds or funding and time capacities and what we're going to get out of this with Adam. I know you brought that up last night as a potential. So I just, while we're here, I don't know if we should just kind of flag that as keeping an eye on that.
I was actually gonna chat with him offline on that here in about 30 seconds.
Perfect.
Yeah, we have a contract, and I intend to live up to our contract.
I'll explain more. what he's-
Yeah. None of
This
motion
is
to
more
adjourn
about
then.
Second.
Money stuff and how we might be able to utilize some money to do some other stuff. So I want to touch base with you real quick on.
Not a public meeting issue.
Nope, not at all. Not having a business discussion.
Okay, so entertain a motion to adjourn.
Rob already did.
You did,
I
second,
second. I
Okay.
did.
discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Anybody opposed?
Can we stay all night?
You're in
You
the
can.
minority, John.
I might.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
all. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.